Hey everyone, this is Tony Holbein. You are listening to the Revenue Formula with Mikkel and Tony. In today's episode, we share the Outbound playbook we use to book 500 meetings with just 3 people on the team. Enjoy.
So, we're recording remotely, and it's not COVID times. That's not why. We decided...
We just don't like each other.
Exactly. We decided, why not try and not be in the same room? And just see what actually happens. Is this better? Is it worse? Because,
You know what's really funny? It took you 1.5 hours to set up, and I got it done in about 10 minutes. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that I would be the fast one this time?
Yeah. I think we've been fairly challenged. Let's just say the least.
You have been fairly challenged.
That's
Come on.
true.
I mean, technology is not your thing. It's not. It's fonts and colors and these kind of things. Everything else is a little bit like too much for Mr. Mikkel.
Yeah, but thank you so much for contributing to the show by showing up.
Hey, I'm doing everything that's required of me, okay? And I'm ticking all the boxes. All the boxes, my friend.
So you had one job today, which was prepare an episode. Have you actually done your homework
It's
here?
even more than just showing up.
Exactly.
It's even more than just showing
I
up.
know. And have you done that homework though?
Of course.
So what are we gonna talk about today?
Mikkel, I mean, come on. Did you not read the show notes?
Course
This is pretty disappointing. So actually, funny story. I obviously have we're using LinkedIn a lot, and we also use it for outreach for Growbox. And there was one outreach, and I never replied to it. I was actually really good lead, so really good person. Saying lead sounds so like impersonal.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Hey, I know. Let's, I mean, you asked me for this chat. When do you want to have that chat?" And I never replied because maybe it was also at the end of Growbox, and it's like, come and screw that. And then he was like, "Tony is like, is this do we want to?" And I never replied. And then finally, I was like, "Hey, I'm just now realizing maybe this was all automated, and you just made it feel like it wasn't. If that's the thing, you guys should probably do an episode."
Yeah.
And guess what?
Here we are.
Now we're doing an episode of this.
And it's so funny. So we're obviously going to talk a bit about Outbound, specifically outreach. And one thing it reminded me of as I was reading through the episode, I remember, I want to say 10 years ago, I got an Outbound message.
When you were 35.
I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, probably. No, I was working at Falcon, and you were as well. I got a outreach from an SDR, and it was a video. And I felt like I still remember it to this day. Not what he said or anything. I remember it was from HubSpot, right? I was like, oh, that's a pretty great outreach versus the, people just spamming on email and stuff. So yeah, I was like, yeah, this is going to be a fun episode for sure. I think what you and I have seen is a lot of folks just still pooping all over Outbound. We have as well,
Yes.
in a previous episode. And I think you wrote in to kind of notice it's being declared every week. And I was like, more like every day. And I think it obviously works for the, outrageousness it is, the likes and engagement. But I think there's also some truth underneath, which is folks are kind of struggling with Outbound.
No, I mean, when you think about what's the history of Outbound, and let's just say kind of more recent one. So it really started with Aaron Ross's predictable revenue, right? He was back in the day writing 50 emails a day and then following up with a cold call basically. And he booked, 10% meetings from those emails. So that was a completely different time. This doesn't work like this anymore. And the way I think people aren't thinking about it is really it's just a technological evolution.
Yeah.
Kind of every time something is being achieved that where people go like, oh wow, this clearly isn't automated, but it is automated. This is then when the bar goes up one step, right? So for example, in the beginning, it was inserting your first name. Like that was, oh wow, they're using Tony, so therefore I'm pretty sure this is not automated.
Correct.
This is genuine. Yeah. Someone is really reaching out right now. And then later on, it was maybe inserting the name in the subject line, or this keeps going on and on. I think the last thing that I could vividly remember was people saying, "Oh, you went to this and that school, and you did this and that thing." trying to basically kind of, they were kind of scraping my LinkedIn profile and then using that to create an email input, right? Trying to make me believe that this was a handcrafted email instead of something automated, which it obviously was at that point, right? And I think if you're trying to win this technology battle, you really need to be at the forefront of that stuff, right? And frankly, what we have seen so far is that AI SDRs are trying to be the ones that are winning this technology battle.
Yeah.
But I think they're, at least for now, who knows, AI, fantastic, blah, blah, blah. But for now, they're kind of not nailing it at all.
Yeah.
I think it's really just a email cannon still. That burns through your domains like crazy. You don't need to follow up with the SDR and check how many activities they logged in a day. Yeah, you don't need to do that anymore. But also, despite all the AI is going to tailor stuff, there ain't much tailoring happening.
No.
As far as I can see. And it's kind of, yes, different emails going out on maybe different channels, but it's still the same email cannon, right? So that stuff actually hasn't been moving technology forward that much, I think, at least in terms of outreach.
There's also 2 points where I'm like, is it really gonna be better to have like an AI seller? The first one it made me think of is there's this scene in The Simpsons where Homer, he gets like a robo dialer 2000 and it calls the entire city with a pre-recorded thing, right? I can see this not working out great. You know, a company connecting that AI SDR and it just starts calling like crazy, every single company. And you forget a setting in there and all of a sudden it calls the company, 10 times per day. I saw someone who was like getting, I think it was like tens of emails every single day from the same AI SDR.
From the same
AI SDR, right? So, and I mean, right now, to be fair, it's in its infancy. Of course, there's going to be those defects from birth. It's just super normal, I think, with technology like that. But I'm also just thinking about the other technology we've had in customer service for ages, where you just end up screaming agent, all writing, agent. And I think we have some ways to go. So let's see if we as humanity can actually nail that technology. That's going to be the big question.
I mean, and the next bigger thing is obviously going to be voice AI, like people calling you, doing cold calls and so forth. So all of this makes total sense, right? So when we were looking at our own go-to-market, and this is now a Growblog story, when we were looking at our own go-to-market, and we were thinking, how can we cut through, right? So I myself have built like 2 or 3 SDR teams, large scale in organizations, like up to, 100 SDRs or something like this. And it worked out beautifully at the perfect CAC payback. It was 12, was predictable. You could just hire more and it would give you the same results. But what we have found is that kind of changed a little bit. The specific company that I'm also referring to, for example, this is what we learned back then, went from a 12 CAC payback to like a 26, 27 CAC payback on that channel.
So that's not an improvement.
No, that's the wrong way up. Yeah. And we kind of were realizing more and more that outbound isn't dead. Like I think people need to differentiate between outreach and outbound.
Yeah.
Right? There's an outbound motion that's the SDR sits down, writes an email, picks up the phone. I think some of that isn't dead, it's just stale. I think those conversion rates are just going to go down. But reaching out, like the act of not waiting for someone to come inbound, but instead taking the initiative, going outside your door and kind of knocking on other people's doors, that still works. Yeah. And by the way, it has to work because not everyone has the luxury of just getting tons of organic inbounds or having an SEO machine or whatever. It's kind of already there. They just don't have the luxury. So they have to go outbound. They have to talk to people and kind of try and kind of get them to, talk to them and buy their services eventually, right? So we were pretty convinced that outreach by itself isn't dead. Some of the tactics are dead, right? And then we were basically kind of discussing, well, how could we push the envelope here, right? And back then, and this is crazily enough, not even a year ago. Wow, it's not even a year ago. We were basically declaring that text is dead.
Yeah.
Text has been taken over. Those emails are super easy to write with AI. Text is done.
But you know what? It's also just like if you want to cut through with text, the bar is just so much higher, like incredibly high. Especially if we're talking emails, there's like two steps. There's first the subject line and the pre-header, where it's like, do I even want to open this email? And then once you decide to open it, it's like, do I want to keep reading this email? Do you know what I mean? It's such an uphill battle already there. So
well, we basically kind of thought the same thing, and then we were saying, okay, you know what? This text thing, I think it's dead. It's not going to work out. And for our specific persona, revenue operations, we also failed to find lots of phone numbers to connect to them, and we also felt like maybe for those it's also not, lots of Gen X and Gen Z folks in there, and they just don't like answering the phone.
No.
I don't like answering.
When I call you,
I don't answer.
You can even see it's me, and it's
answer.
like, beep, no.
Yeah. So basically, my phone is set up in a way it doesn't even ring anymore.
Yeah.
The only notification I get is a text message afterwards that someone called me, but I never see the actual phone call happening, right? And we then kind of decided, okay, not text, it's not going to be phone. Let's do something else, and we actually decided to do a video, right? And back then, video, you had Synthese around doing some of those avatars, but they're super clunky. You didn't have Sona or I don't know, this other OpenAI thing yet. And we were kind of feeling like, hey, we maybe have a year. We maybe have a year where we can own this video thing and still make it, seem authentic. And what we basically started with, super low tech in the beginning. My LinkedIn game was good. People knew me. I was connected to a bunch of people already. I basically sat down and recorded, I think, 30 or 40 videos, like straight up videos. I would kind of pull up the LinkedIn page of someone. This would be also what I'm sharing, kind of the LinkedIn page of that person. I would say, hey, Mikkel, really, hi from Growblocks. I saw you did X, Y, and Z. Sounds super impressive. I just checked out your company. Then I would go to the next tab of the company. It's like, hey, you guys had 250 people, so many in go-to-market. Must be pretty difficult to keep track of everything, right? Let me show you what we built in order to do that.
Yeah.
And then I actually jumped over and did the next tab and showed the platform.
Yeah.
Showed Growblocks, basically, kind of give a mini demo.
Yeah.
Then I said, hey, if this is interesting, just ping me.
Yeah.
Boop, bye. And sent this thing out. We played around with, versions that were 3 minutes long. That was not good. A minute was difficult to get enough personalization and authenticity into it to then earn the right to show the platform and stuff. But it worked out.
Yeah.
Like that worked out. And I think in the beginning, it's also a bit unfair because people knew me already, and some of them either were creeped out, and that's always the case with outreach, right? People are kind of, especially when it personalized, people, some fraction of the folks will be creeped out. It's like, wow, Tony, did you really just sit down and record like a video for me? And fair enough.
Yeah.
Which I, by the way, totally did. Yeah. So this was all manual labor, nothing AI, anything. This was just me sitting down doing this stuff. But got a lot of replies. Like it started a lot of conversations. And it didn't start a conversation in the sense of like, oh, do you want to like have half an hour call? You and I would just talk about revenue operations and how the space is going. No, this was a clear CTA. Hey, do you want to talk about, the product?
Yeah.
Not necessarily buying the product, but do you want to talk about the product? And it was pretty clear to people that this was a sales conversation that's happening, not just a chatty moment or something like that.
I was also just going to say, like, when you think about most selling, so right now we're reselling some of the old equipment on what's the equivalent of Craigslist in Denmark, right? And could you just imagine trying to sell something there where you're, number one, not showing it, and you're not putting the price up? And I think that's the majority, by the way, of Outbound. I think that's why at least video is such a beautiful format, because you can show things you just can't. If you put a screenshot into an email with text, forget it. Like it's going to hit a spam filter. People aren't going to see it. It's going to be, huge email all of a sudden versus video. It's so different, right? And I think you can also connect on a very different level all of a sudden with the person on the other side, which I think, to be honest, I think going forward with all the technology we have, that's going to matter even more, right? Because now you can scale, you can hire these AI agents to just do outbound for you. And then if someone decides to actually Google that person, you just find like, oh, does not exist. Great.
Yeah.
So
Yes. I think one of the moments where we're like, hey, this might be working out was actually we used, I'm not sure if it was Loom or Vidyard or some video platform like this. And it basically tracks how many times it's being opened and viewed.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's basic shit. And we had one video sent to a fairly large organization. I think it was 500 people or something like this. And that video got viewed 50 times.
yeah.
And
Got shared with the sales team. Hey guys, look at this.
exactly.
You should do it. You should do the same.
yes. And basically the RevOps guy was writing back, this is how outbound should work.
Yes.
And then he shared it with his whole sales org. They didn't buy or anything like this. It was just like, that's the tactic.
Yeah.
That's how it should be done. And this is when we're like, okay, you know what? Probably this thing is working out. And then what we basically did afterwards is trying to find more and more ways to automate the whole thing. And this is then where, we hired some folks. Like we had 2-3 SDRs. One, I would say, is like an outbound engineer, kind of David Kübler. Look him up. He's a fantastic guy. Basically kind of trying to figure out what are the different pieces of the puzzle that we need to stitch together because, recording 30 or 40 of those videos, it's like it's a penalty.
Yeah.
You need to sit down for 3 or 4 hours and do this, and then you're not happy with the take, you redo it and so forth. So we basically kind of try to find ways, how can we automate more and more and more and more of this stuff away?
Yeah. I think one important thing to note here is it started out as something that is highly unscalable when you think about it, right?
Yes.
But you also have to realize that then you can start solving that problem, which is a way better problem to have than, we don't have a motion that's working, right? So I think it's better to say, well, this is working, but if we scale it like it's done now, it's going to be highly inefficient. So how do we improve that, right? I think that's especially what you want revenue operations or those types of folks to actually work on figuring out. I think the other factor that's really interesting to just note here is, I think for a lot of outbound, previously it's been about the quantity of outreach and not the quality, right? So when we talked, just in marketing circles, when we talked about creating content, it's like, well, you could do more volume, but you could also do rich content, like add a deck or a PDF or a video or some proprietary research. And I think that's where it can get tilted into now. So, we've used a rich format, but also kind of set up a way to create appeal with this LinkedIn in the background. So it's not just hey, we do video and then boom, works. Like you do need to put thought into it, right?
No, what we, I know some of the people listening, they received something like this from me. So they know exactly what I'm talking about. But really what you need to imagine is I am as Tony talking to you. I have your LinkedIn profile open in the background, which you can see. You can see your own LinkedIn profile. I'm scrolling up and down your LinkedIn profile and saying stuff. And then I'm jumping to your company's profile and I'm saying stuff there.
Yeah.
Right? Basically what's happening then the first 30 seconds is, oh shit, this is really for me.
Yeah.
Like this is, first of all, I can see my own picture here. Scary. What's Tony going to say about my picture?
Yeah.
Do I look good? Does he approve? Like, what is going to happen here? Kind of there's an immediate like, oh wow, let me at least listen to this thing, right? And then you basically buy the right for them to continue listening after you maybe said something smart or something funny or something authentic, something that is incredibly difficult to completely AI away, like the whole thing, right? And then you earned the right to jump into the pitch. And the pitch is really just a show and tell, right? And what we then did as a next step is, as step one, we had then SDRs, 2 or 3, that basically did the same thing. They had, the LinkedIn profile of someone in the background. They were commenting on things. They were talking about some insight that they might be seeing. And then they were sending this out in a LinkedIn message, right? That was kind of step one. Obviously, their conversion rates went down. They were not recognizable. They didn't, it wasn't me basically there. But they had tons more time to create those videos, right? And Once we hit that stage, we were thinking, okay, number one, how can we get Tony back in the game because he has nicer conversion rates? But then also number two, okay, yes, we're kind of doing this on LinkedIn and that's our channel, but there's also email, let's not forget email.
Yeah.
The problem with LinkedIn is that you have basically limitation of how many people you can connect with to send them a message for free, right? That becomes the main bottleneck when you really think about how can we scale this thing. And then the bottleneck before that is basically how many connection requests can you send per week, right? That becomes like a bottleneck you want to manage. And if you can't manage that well enough, you will need to rely on some emails as a second channel or as a third channel there as well, right? But what we did there then is to basically also embed the video. Like we were basically kind of leading with the video. Sure, there's a subject, title, and so forth, but I think it was a one-liner and then video and kind of a snippet so you can see it. Some email experts will tell me like, oh, probably the image didn't load for like 80% of the people because of whatever reason. But it worked, right? People were watching this video. And if someone was watching the video, we would then get a ping to then do, even more reach out basically, right? Kind of, if we got to a point where someone watched, I think 70% or something like this of the video, they would then receive a cold call from us, or we would kind of go a bit stronger there because there was already some recognition then at that point, right? They've seen our SDRs' faces and voices and so forth. And we basically kind of then could add some additional channels on top of the initial touch point.
Yeah. I think another, so besides the how do we reach out, there was also another thing kind of happening, which was let's say almost the account selection piece, right?
Before we go into that, I just want to finish the story here. Because I think there's one important leg missing, which I almost forgot, which was how do we get Tony back in the game? And like, hey, busy CEO, blah, 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 doing all of these things, can't do 4 hours a day of video recording. And then what we did was basically we looked at the video we produced and we saw there were repetitive tasks and then there were things that are slightly different. And actually what we then ended up doing is let me show you the platform that was canned, like completely. Like this was... I did 5 to 10 takes and then we selected the best one and that's then the one we took. This was one cut.
And then it changed between you having a red sweatshirt and then
and then the other cut was where I'm still on the LinkedIn profile, which is then like, oh, geez, this is me. And I'm still saying someone's name. But the name was actually AI generated. The name was AI generated. I'm saying then Mikkel. And it was kind of funny because things like Mikkel, it kind of got wrong. But things like super complicated Chinese names that I could never pronounce correctly, I suddenly felt like I was speaking Mandarin fluently, right? So it was like, hi, whatever. And then I went into a little bit of, personalization. That was also canned. That was always the same. And that then really created the first name or bringing up the name at some point in the conversation. And then as the background picture, the LinkedIn profile, that then created that familiarity that, oh, this is unique. This is about me. Let me listen to that. That then helped them to transition to actually watching the actual pitch, right? And with that stuff... I could send out 40, 50 emails or engagements like this per day without doing a single amount of work, like nothing. I had to do nothing in order to get all of that.
So what was it you had to record? Because you didn't have to record the demo of the platform. What did you have to record in order to send out actually?
Nothing. Nothing. Was all basically it was like 2 chapters. One was the demo recording, and that stayed the same across several different variants of the pitch. And then I only had to record the first part once. The AI changed the name around. And the AI changed the LinkedIn profile in the background around. So basically, kind of the 2 things: audio and video changing, which is pretty neat actually. It was pretty good.
And I think it's also just like when you look at the production, we had 2 phone booths, we had professional mics. we had a couple of things to really enable that the quality of this thing was top notch. So I think it was really well executed. And I think the other piece that really mattered a great deal is also we knew exactly who we were going after. We had a shared account list between sales and marketing. I mean, I say it like it's two massive departments. We were sitting in the same room, but
no, but let's talk about that actually a little bit more, right? Because I don't have a great story to tell about the account selection itself. And maybe you have more to share there. But I think one realization in this super early beginning, we had SDRs at some point already, didn't work out, need to kind of change that. And I was like, hey, no, Mikkel and I were going after the LinkedIn audience. We're going after, the newsletter folks. Don't touch those. Build your own list, similar accounts, but your own engagement thing over there, and do that instead. That was fucking stupid.
Yeah,
that was stupid.
That was really stupid.
But it back in the day, it would make perfect sense. Like, how can we do attribution? Oh yeah, that's right. We should just have different channels, then we can attribute perfectly. But we were basically kind of changing business outcomes, degrading business outcomes in order to have better attribution.
So I think,
which is completely silly. But also, we're not the only ones doing that. That's like across the board, a bunch of people who are doing this exact same thing.
So a couple of things here. We had Harrison Rose on talking about the paddle story. He mentioned how when they built up the marketing team, they basically said the ICP, it's this list of companies. That's like, those are the ones we want you to bring in, period, right? So they worked off of the same list. And I was like, that actually makes sense. And then to your point, yes, I think a lot of marketing teams, they will be very protective of their brand audience. If you went to a very well established company now and said, hey, we're going to go after every single LinkedIn follower of the company page and the CEO, they're going to be like, not sure I like that. But if those are the customers you want, what's the big deal? Honestly. And you have to realize, and I think that was our realization, is you have an email list. How long does it take for someone to finally crack and go, you know what? Yes, you've added in the demo request thousands of times. Now is the day. I'm going to do it. Let's celebrate. I'm going to click that button. I think you and I had a couple of conversations on that. Was like, they're not just going to miraculously do it all the time themselves.
So the thing is, right? So number one, all of your demand gen guns should be trained at the same time.
Yeah.
Like that, it's when you say it out loud, it sounds so obvious, but that's what it should be, right? And then the realization also that, whatever the real number is, but for someone to take action or be aware of your brand or something like that, they need to be exposed to it several times. Some people say 7 times.
Yeah.
And this is like a B2C thing, like, you need to see a TV ad and maybe then you have an out-of-home banner or you see something on the internet. But 7 times you need to be touched by that brand for you to like, okay, now I know what a Mars bar is. And we were basically saying like, hey, wait a minute, that's probably not that super much different from B2B also, right? So this is realization number one. And then however we can try and get to those folks, it's the same folks, but however we can do that, we should totally do that. And maybe they're sitting in a community, maybe they're sitting somewhere else, maybe you should kind of go there as well. And then the other realization was, and that's the same with, subscribing. Everyone who's not subscribed, you should subscribe. It's free. It's great for us, but it's also going to be great for you if you do it. The other realization was you need to ask for it, which I just did, right? You have to ask for someone to take action.
Yeah.
Very rarely is someone just going to be like, you know what, actually, now something in my life changed. I really want to go and do this one thing. Rarely that just happens by itself. You need to go and tap someone on the shoulder and do that. And what we realized with the outreach, we had a fairly large pool of folks that are lukewarm and interested, but not really ready to take action. Maybe they're busy, maybe they have other problems. And what we then basically wanted to do is we wanted to create an army of people that tap those folks on the shoulder. It's like, hey, you ready now? I mean, I still remember there were so many opportunities booked where one of the SDRs reached out once or twice, booked the opportunity and high fives all around and boom, rock star, you fucking nailed it. And then Mikkel and I looked at the engagement. It's like, oh no, this person has 5 stars on our Substack.
Yeah.
And we know that person has been listening to our podcast.
They wrote us on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Or like, right?
So So there was so many other connections there, and when you're sitting there, it's like, oh damn, is it? I think this is really a marketing opportunity. But you know what? Who gives a shit?
Yeah,
honestly?
I think that was also the conversation we had at one point when, oh, should we do the rules of engagement on attribution? I was like, yeah, let me go sharpen my knives now. I think let's park that conversation for a second, though. I think what's also beautiful about this approach of having SDRs reach out to the marketing audience is, as a marketing team, you can actually do less selling when you think about it. You don't have to put a demo request in every single email. When you have something new or you really want to sell, then that's what you do. So you send out an email that's actually a sales email, not just something where you put a CTA that's completely separate in the bottom or something. So I kind of changed that, I think, approach a little bit as well. But I think going after the same list, extremely helpful. And I mean, we then took it to the point where we created the audience on LinkedIn, ran thought leader ads with Tony. Yes. Next on the list was all the SDRs, by the way, to kind of help them get a bit more surface with the audience we were reaching out to. And then the beautiful thing is some of these contacts were in our CRM, so we could basically flag when they were visiting the website to our team, right? And it's like, okay, I sent them this outbound message yesterday and now they're on the website. Let's see, maybe I should do something now in a follow-up or whatever, right? And I think that level of collaboration also worked out really, really well.
Yeah, and I think, ultimately, yes, you need to kind of try and focus on the same target. The other thing really is, in this extremely busy market, is sure you can create a cool product and so forth, but you also in your outbound, in your outreach, in your marketing, in the way you present yourself, you have to be unique to some degree.
Yeah.
You have to stand out in some way. And I think we achieved this actually pretty well. We booked more demos than we actually needed. We just didn't convert.
We didn't close them, damn it.
So, I mean, it's, you can always blame me, the sales guy, Mikkel. But ultimately, I think this worked actually extremely well, right? We had a really nice content engine running. We built a lot of organic reach.
Yeah.
And I think people should copy that totally, right? Kind of this whole founder-led thing doesn't necessarily need to be that, but, create a content engine and then find other ways to try and tap into the same audience, and don't do that with sending an email. Try and do that with something that has a much larger chance of actually being viewed and consumed. Because if that doesn't happen, the outreach as a whole basically practically didn't happen.
Pretty much.
Right?
And I mean, if you don't want to build it yourself, you can probably write a message to Tony or me on LinkedIn and see if we would be willing to come on as advisors or do some contract work.
Yes.
So do that.
To help you with that.
But I think, by the way, in any case, what we will do, and I'm not going to promise it's going to be there as the episode live, but we should definitely do a Substack newsletter on how we actually did this, maybe with just the structure laid out for folks to see and some of the solutions, examples of the different outreaches we had. So if you're not subscribed, check out revenueformula.substack.com. We'll definitely have something on this in the future.
That's it.
I think we're at the end here of the episode.
Mikkel, I'm not sure if I liked it more or less. I think
what I like now is
I liked it more because I can just hang up and do my own thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's like we don't have that awkwardness of being in the room and who's gonna clean up and blah 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 blah. It's just like bye. Anyway.
So everyone, if you liked it, that's great, and maybe tell some other folks about it. And otherwise, thank you so much for listening and maybe watching, and have a great day.
Bye.